Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name's Colton. I like to talk about Bibles, books, and theology related things. I have a book review for you today, and that book is I Have My Doubts by Philip Ryken. How God Can Use Your Uncertainty to Reawaken Your Faith. Let's get into it.
I fix my eyes on Christ.
First off, I want to thank Crossway for sending me this book for a fair and honest review. I selected it. The title was intriguing to me, and I wanted to get into it and see what was there. So in this book, Ryken sort of takes several different instances from Scripture to bring about seeing people in the Bible who struggled with doubt and sort of pressing into that. And I'll quickly read to you the contents, so you know each chapter. Of course, there's a preface, but then the first one is doubting God's trustworthy word, and we have Eve in the Garden of Eden. The second chapter is doubting God's saving promise, Sarah under the oak tree. The third chapter is doubting God's missional call, Moses at the burning bush. The fourth chapter is doubting God's supernatural protection, Elisha's servants at Dothan. Chapter 5 is doubting God's abundant generosity, Naomi on the road to Bethlehem. Chapter 6 is doubting God's basic fairness, Asaph outside of God's temple. That's a psalm. Chapter 7 is doubting God's loving care, Jeremiah in prison. And chapter 8 is doubting God's miraculous healing, the Father in the crowd. Chapter 9 is doubting God's resurrection power, Thomas in the upper room. And then chapter 10 is doubting your doubts, Peter on the Sea of Galilee. Now let me first say why I think this book, when I finished it, I thought, this is such a great practical resource that I would happily give to people who are struggling with doubts. It's not a very long read. It doesn't take long to get through it. And it even could be used as a tool to sort of dive into particular areas of doubt if you just look at the table of contents and sort of want to press into one of those topics. I think it's good to acknowledge the fact that Christians struggle with doubt. There are certain aspects of the faith where, as we're progressing, as we're being sanctified, we experience levels of doubt. And this book is really helpful in sort of pressing into those biblically so that we can see that we're not alone in this, that there are people throughout the scriptures who have struggled with doubt. I was particularly helped by the chapter regarding Asaph and doubting the goodness of God, to sort of expressing his view in the psalm where he is really articulating, God, I just don't see the wicked being punished for what they're doing, and I see the righteous being persecuted. What am I supposed to do with this doubt? And that's one that I've wrestled with before, and I really was helped by Ryken in this book. I want to read a couple of quotes that sort of stood out to me that I think are really helpful and good. One of the first quotes is just from chapter 3, right in the very beginning, where he says, "The best way to begin working through my spiritual struggle is to open the Bible and see what it says." And I think that's important, and Ryken would also sort of make this case that we need, when we're doubting certain aspects of who God says he is, we need to read more of who he says he is. We interpret Scripture with Scripture, and we see, in so doing, a more fleshed out picture of maybe the thing that we are struggling with. So I really appreciated him diving into some things related to that. So another thing I appreciated from Ryken in this book is not just what to do when you yourself are having doubts, but also how you can be a help to those who are doubting. In his chapter on doubting God's abundant generosity, where he's sort of breaking down the story of Naomi and Ruth, he says this, and I'm just going to read a couple of lines here. We see the person of Naomi, and she is bitter, and here's what he says. As long as Naomi was singing that bitter tune, it is doubtful whether she was very good company. People who complain about everything have a way of sucking the joy out of life, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. So there's a reality to what he's saying there. But then he encourages us and uses the character of Ruth to show us how we can be of help to people who are doubting. He says this: Ruth's promise was a life-giving blessing to Naomi. Doubters do not necessarily need someone to answer all their questions. They probably do not want a lot of unsolicited advice, even good advice. But doubters do need believers who refuse to give up on them. They need someone to stay with them when their faith is sinking down, someone who shows them a loving example of trusting in the living God, as Ruth did when she walked alongside Naomi all the way back to Bethlehem. When our faith is strong, we should not turn away from friends who are struggling spiritually, but stay with them on their journey and then see what God will do. So I find that particularly helpful, and he really sort of expresses in this book how Ruth was that encouragement to doubters. So this book is not just about dealing with our own doubts, but how we can help others who are, in fact, doubting. And then, towards the end, and this is the last little thing I want to mention, he has a quote from Joni Eareckson Tada in here. And if you don't know who she is, highly recommend reading her story. It's very powerful. But on doubting your doubts, he's talking about faith and how that faith looks in the midst of some of these things. He quotes Joni Eareckson Tada, who said this: faith isn't the ability to believe long and far into the misty future. It's simply taking God at his word and taking the next step. There are many throughout biblical history who have struggled with doubts. There are many in church history who have struggled with various different forms of it. I think particularly of William Cooper, who was a hymn writer who struggled with depression and doubting even his very salvation, who is also one of the best hymn writes out there, in my opinion. So we need to dive into this topic, and I think this book is an excellent way to do that. And I'm really thankful for Ryken's work here. And I said I was going to start giving a rating system for every book review I do. So I'm going to rate this book a solid 4 out of 5 stars. It's not perfect. There are some things in it that I wanted to press into a little bit more that he didn't. There are some things he brings up in there that I kind of was iffy about a little bit. But overall, I think it's a solid read. I would recommend it to you. I'll have it linked down in the description if you're interested in checking this book out. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick book review, and I will see you in the next video.